What's up, preppers? Welcome back to another video. Today we're going to talk about grid down in the UK and the consequences of that. The UK's electricity grid, like many modern grids around the world, is designed robust and resilient, but it does have vulnerabilities. Here are some of the factors that contribute to its fragility. Aging infrastructure. Some parts of UK electricity infrastructure are aging and may not be as robust as modern systems. Upgrades and maintenance are necessary to ensure reliability. Cybersecurity threats. The increasing resilience on digital technologies for grid management introduces risks related to cyber attacks. A successful attack could disrupt operations or lead to power outages. Dependence on weather. A significant portion of the UK's electricity comes from renewable sources such as wind and solar energy. While these sources contribute to sustainability, they can also be intermittent, leading to potential supply challenges during unfavourable weather conditions. Extreme weather events. The UK is not immune to extreme weather, which can disrupt power through downed lines, damaged infrastructure, and increase demand for heating and cooling. Single points of failure. Like any grid, the UK system can be susceptible to single points of failure. If critical infrastructure, such as substations, transmission lines, were to fail, it could lead to widespread outages. And potential solar storms. While the risk from a solar storm is relatively low, significant coronal mass ejections, or CMEs, can potentially disrupt electrical systems. The grid is somewhat exposed to these risks, although there are measures in place to mitigate them. This is what we're going to think about further, though, with our current solar activity. Now, to completely disrupt the world's power systems, a solar flare would have to be exceptionally large. Specifically, a CME associated with a major solar flare. These events can release enormous amounts of energy and charged particles into space that can interact with the Earth's magnetic field. The Carrington event of 1859 serves as a historical benchmark of such an occurrence. The Carrington event was said to be an X15 class solar flare, but it's important to note that the X-class classification system for solar flares was only established in the 70s. While researchers estimate the Carrington event was likely an X15 or even more powerful using modern scales, it's difficult to assign a precise value, as the scale is based on observations and measurements that were unavailable at the time. Now, let's theorize though, but I'm going to be the eternal optimist here. In these numbers that I'm going to give you, I'm going to say that the fighting British spirit has come out, the blitz mentality, people have come together, people are sharing alternative energies and food and things like that, and everyone's trying to make it through these hard times. And these numbers are based on that optimism. So not so much the doom and gloom and the fear and everyone's going to kill each other side of things. With that being said, let's run the numbers. So first, we're going to do a total grid collapse in the UK for 30 days. That would have a profound and widespread effect on society, infrastructure, and daily life. But here's a detailed look of the potential outcomes. In the first few days, obviously, we have the power outage, a complete loss of electricity leading to non-functional homes, businesses, hospitals, and other critical facilities. Communication breakdown, because the failure of mobile networks, internet and landlines will severely hinder communication. Transport disruption, including public transport, trains, trams, etc., ceasing operations, traffic signals failing and airports being unable to operate. Water supply issues. Pumps for water supply and sewage treatment plants would stop, leading to water shortages and sanitation issues. Food supply disruption. Supermarkets and shops would quickly run out of food due to panic buying, and we've seen this happen in recent times. But they wouldn't have that restock ability. Healthcare. Hospitals relying on generators would face fuel shortages, impacting patient care, surgeries, and the storage of medicines. 2 to 4 weeks. Public health concerns would be an increased risk of diseases due to poor sanitation, lack of clean water, and spoilage of food. Economic standstill, businesses unable to operate, leading to economic paralysis. Banks and ATMs not functional, causing cash shortages. The security issues, of course, are a potential risk in crime due to the lack of lighting, security systems, and strained law enforcement resources. The long-term impact from 30 days onwards would be prolonged lack of basic necessities, could lead to public unrest, protests, and looting. Government and emergency services would be completely stretched, strained, if not collapsed by this point, and overwhelmed with what was required of them. The infrastructure degradation, damage to electrical infrastructure due to lack of maintenance, and potentially complicating recovery efforts would start from this point. Not forgetting, of course, the psychological impacts, widespread stress, anxiety, and a potential mental health crisis due to prolonged uncertainty and hardship. A total grid collapse in the UK for 30 days would be catastrophic, affecting nearly every aspect of life. The country would face significant challenges in maintaining public health, safety, and order. Long-term recovery would require coordinated efforts from local, national, and international entities. And that's just the first 30 days. What we're talking about now is 90 days. That is what a lot of preppers do prep for. They look at 90 days when it comes to food supply and things like that. And I constantly hear from preppers that you've just got to survive the first 90 days, and after that, most people will be dead. But I don't think it would be as easy as that, or as quick as that, I should say. So estimating the number of deaths from a 90-day total grid collapse in the UK involves extrapolating from impacts observed in shorter-term scenarios and considering additional factors that would come into play over a longer duration. The extended period would exacerbate initial challenges and introduce new ones, potentially increasing mortality significantly. Some of the key factors to this over 90 days would, of course, be the healthcare system collapse. Over 90 days, a healthcare system would likely face complete collapse, lack of power for medical equipment, dwindling supplies of essential medicines, and the inability to maintain sanitary conditions would result in high mortality rates from previously treatable conditions. The water and sanitation, long-term lack of clean water, proper sanitation would lead to widespread outbreaks of waterborne diseases, significantly increasing the death toll. The cumulative effect of dehydration and malnutrition would also be severe. Prolonged disruption to the food supply chain would result in severe food shortages. Starvation and related diseases would become a major cause of death, especially among vulnerable people. Exposure to the elements, of course, would be an issue depending when this happened. Over an extended period, lack of heating in cold weather and inadequate shelter would lead to deaths from hypothermia and related conditions. In warmer months, heat exhaustion and dehydration would be concerns. Civil unrest and violence. Now, I know this is a biggie with a lot of preppers, and a lot of them think it will turn completely to chaos, which I've even mentioned in a few videos before. With resources becoming increasingly scarce, civil unrest, violence, and crime rates would likely rise, resulting in additional fatalities. And mental health, of course. We touched on it for the 30 days, but for the 90 days, that's even more. Extended stress, anxiety, societal breakdown could lead to increased suicides, domestic violences, and other mental health related deaths. So let's look at the potential death tolls based on the UK grid down for this 90-day period. Considering these factors, the death toll from a 90-day total grid collapse in the UK could range from tens of thousands to potentially over 100,000. This estimate includes the healthcare system collapse being 20 to 30,000 fatalities. Disease outbreaks, 20 to 40,000 fatalities. Starvation and malnutrition, 30 to 50,000 fatalities. Cold exposure, 5 to 10,000 fatalities. Civil unrest and crime, 5 to 10,000 fatalities. That's 140,000 potential fatalities just through the grid down in the UK. This is also taking in mitigation measures into account, aid from overseas, things like that. And if this was just an effect on the UK, you could bet that there'll be aid coming from all over the place, from different countries, from all over the world. So there's all sorts of mitigation factors in that brings us to them numbers. The 90-day total grid collapse in the UK would have catastrophic consequences, with a potential death toll over 100,000 easily. This underscores the importance of disaster preparedness, resilience infrastructure, and effective emergency response plans. Many of the reasons that a lot of us prep, and maybe a reason that the government should be more prepared for something like this. If it was even worse, if we are talking X40, X50, X100, solar flares, absolute devastating impact to the whole planet. If the entire world experienced a total power grid collapse for 90 days, the death toll in the UK would definitely be a lot higher without their mitigation. The global factors in this are the UK relies heavily on international trade for food, medicine, fuel, and other essential goods. A worldwide power outage would severely disrupt all global supply chains, leading to critical shortages. Of course, that's going to mean a lack of international aid. With a global crisis, international aid and support would be limited or non-existent. Countries would prioritise their own survival, leaving the UK to cope without any external help. Given these exacerbating factors, the death toll in the UK could be significantly higher than a localised grid collapse. Let's break that down to the potential impacts again. The healthcare system collapse, the estimated deaths would go up to 30 to 50,000. Disease outbreaks from lack of sanitation could be 50 to 100,000. Starvation and malnutrition could be estimated 100 to 200,000 fatalities. Cold exposure, 10 to 20,000. Civil unrest, 10 to 20,000. And mental health crisis, up to 10,000 again. I do think them last three numbers are very conservative, but this is based on the information and the data we've collected and gathered, and based on the fact that a lot of people would come together. As much as we see it in the movies, that people will fight and kill each other for everything going, then in a true crisis like that, I think a lot of people would come together, a lot of communities would help each other. That's at 400,000 people over 90 days. If we had a complete, that's just in the UK, 400,000 fatalities within 90 days from a total worldwide grid collapse. Of course, this is all estimates and it's only rough estimates. It could be dramatically less, it could be dramatically more. I think more likely the latter, because what's not taken into account is the personal factor of it's all right saying the emergency services will mitigate a lot of this, but they're still individuals who have to think about themselves and their own family. So how many of them would actually carry on serving? And if you could actually have an effective and coordinated government response as well as community resilience, this is all to do with communication yet again and having them supplies there. I do think the UK people in general could adapt and innovate very quickly. Rapid adaptation and innovation in local food production, water purification and medical care would reduce the death toll dramatically. And it's not new technologies, it's reverting back to old ways and old technologies. And there is a lot of capable people that could lead the charge on something like this. And of course, the massive caveat to this is how big our community is. Yes, it's a small percentage of the UK population, but with recent government advice advising everybody to have 3 days worth of food, although that might seem inadequate and the advice itself might seem inadequate, that advice alone coming from a government body might have got a lot more people thinking. And the more people that prep, the less people will have to save. So even with these conservative estimates, they are still quite scary numbers. And this in a matter of 90 days, 3 months. That's no time at all. Let me know your thoughts below. I know some of you are going to think these numbers are ridiculously low, and some of you may think they're too high. But I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. I do endeavour to read all the comments and reply where I can. That's it for this one, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. Hope it wasn't too dark for the channel. Don't forget, like, subscribe, comment, all that wonderful stuff, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye.